Hey, good evening, everybody. You are on the inaugural, the very first episode of the Bluff Creek Project Podcast. And I'm joined tonight. My name is Kipp Morrill, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host and good friend, fellow Bigfooter, Mr. Tate Hieronymus, who is not related to
the actual,
but that's all right.
Bob Hieronymus of the PG film, where he's infamous. Yeah.
Are you infamous or just infamous?
I'm infamous, so I'm close to. I don't know how that works really. So yeah, just forget that.
Outstanding. Well, real quick, maybe we should let our guests know a little bit maybe about ourselves real quick before we get into our first guests. So first of all, Tate, tell us a little bit about how you got into Bigfooting. Where are you right now, and what's going on?
I'm currently in the Midwest in Des Moines, Iowa. The great state of corn. But I got into Bigfoot from the whole, growing up watching the PG film. And just that really struck a chord with me, and just thinking there could be something out here. And I was kind of already a weird kid. So that's really what got me into the whole subject of Bigfoot, was that film.
And I think that it's quite interesting that I would say it seems like a majority of people, at least and I guess you and I kind of transcend different generations, but I'm 52 years old. My name's Kipp Morrill, by the way, and I actually got into the whole Bigfoot subject. I grew up in Redding, California as a young boy, and I remember hearing the tales about a large hair-covered creature in the woods, and I was very intrigued by it. And of course, one of the first experiences that I had was seeing the Patterson-Gimlin film. And so over time, it became something that became, of course, with the invention of the internet and having more Facebook groups and having more interaction kind of out and about, I became more and more interested. And over time, I actually got into meeting some people that were also into Bigfooting. And that kind of led me down the path where we're kind of headed tonight, which is the Bluff Creek Project. And I was fortunate enough to get to know some incredible people, fun, smart, and dedicated, and trying to find the actual film site where this 1967 film was shot. And so over time, that film site had all but disappeared until maybe I'm going to say about 6 to 7 years ago, a group of people decided, hey, let's go out and try and find this site. And that kind of leads us into what the Bluff Creek Project really is. And we've got two of the original members of the Bluff Creek Project who are going to be joining us here shortly. And they're going to tell us a little bit about the project themselves and kind of where the research is going. So what do you think, Tate?
I think that's good. And like you were saying, the Bluff Creek Project, they're the ones that found the film site. And
rediscovered.
Yeah, they rediscovered the film site. And I think it's cool because now that I've been a part of the Bluff Creek Project, and then you have too, you and I both know that there's so much going on with the project. It's so hard to keep up on social media. And so after a while, it's like I think a cool way to keep up with it is a podcast, because you can talk about a lot of things that's been going on that you can't really do on social media.
I think that's a great point. And there is a lot going on. There's a lot that still needs to be done. And there's still a lot of information to be gathered out there. I think that that's a really good point, Tate. So without further ado, let's welcome Robert Leiterman and Rowdy Kelley. So first of all, Robert Leiterman is a retired Park Service ranger that lives over on the coast. He likes to say he's retired, but he's actually still heavily involved in teaching at police academies, etc. And then Rowdy Kelley, one of the original members also, is heavily involved with different film projects from Hollywood to others, and is also very heavily involved. We can let them tell us a little bit more about themselves. But welcome, Robert and Rowdy.
Hey guys, awesome to be on the Bluff Creek Podcast. I can't believe it's happening.
It's surreal.
Excited to have you. Rowdy, since you started off first, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole interesting subject of Bigfoot?
Well, as usual, it's not an easy story to tell, but I can't say that as a kid I was highly interested in Bigfoot, but I knew of Bigfoot. Coincidentally, even though I didn't know this as a young child, I guess my grandfather, per my uncle, supposedly went to the Jerry Crew site in 1958. My grandpa was a Jippo logger and may have known Crew at the time, or just at least heard of it. But I didn't realize, not until probably 3 or 4 years ago, that the importance of that, and that growing up in southern Humboldt, that my grandfather actually believed in Bigfoot. But regardless, in about 2010, I got called to work on a movie up here in Humboldt County. By the way, Robert, you there?
Yep, still here.
All right, there he is. Robert and I actually live pretty close to each other. We're only probably about, I'd say 5 miles, 6 miles apart, something like that. But we're over on the coast. And anyway, I got a chance to work on a Bigfoot movie, and I got a little too involved with that movie as far as doing a lot of different things. And I had already knew Bobo from my college days at Humboldt State. And but he and I ended up working together on that show. I brought him in to do security for the set, and he ended up helping us out. Anyway, I kind of got into Bigfoot at that moment, working on that show, because that led me into working on Finding Bigfoot. And it was the 2-hour episode, the ending of the first season, and we were going to the Bluff Creek Project, or excuse me, the Bluff Creek Patterson-Gimlin film site. And that kind of led me into this project, because I knew Robert from doing location scouting on movies, and I heard he was the Bigfoot guy. So as soon as I got the call that I was going to work on Finding Bigfoot, I gave him a call, and I ended up going on a DFRO expedition a few weeks before Finding Bigfoot came into town. And there I met Steven Struford, and we looked at this book and looked at these stills of Patty, and they talked about the importance of the film site, which at the time I really wasn't convinced the importance of finding that film site. But later on, I realized the importance of it. That led me into working with those guys, and then working on a few other Finding Bigfoot shows. But they sucked me in, and right towards the end, where they were kind of narrowed in on this one spot. And I had actually been to the spot on Finding Bigfoot with Bob Gimlin and the whole crew. And standing across the sandbar, looking the way Roger would have been looking, I did not see the scene at all. I wasn't convinced that was the place. And later, after working with Steven and Robert and doing the site measurement, I definitely got convinced on that. But the backstory of the Bluff Creek Project, I think I'm going to leave that over to Robert and let him introduce himself.
Awesome. And one other thing, Rowdy, I think that you also are in possession of the official Bluff Creek Project animal, and I think her name is Chloe.
Sure. Yeah, sure. Chloe, the foxy rat. She has more miles on the Patterson-Gimlin site than any other animal down there, I'm sure. It's definitely humans. So she has a great time. She knows we're going out there. There's a truck that she's been going out there since she was 1 year old. So she's going to be 10 this year. So it's going on 9 years of her going out there. So
wow.
And that's how far back this project goes, is going on right about, as far as figuring out the spot. That's going on like 10 years now, isn't it, Robert?
Yeah,
9.
pretty much. Yeah, 2010.
Is that Robert Leiterman, the Bigfoot Ranger, one of the original Bluff Creek Project members? So, Rob, good evening. How's it over on the coast? And can you tell us about you?
Oh, how's it over on the coast? Well, it's been raining on and off, and it's not too bad. I was out pulling weeds quite a bit. I don't want to miss my 6 o'clock appointment. Almost did. Apologize for that. But I got a bunch of weeds pulled. And so you want to know my original involvement in the Bluff Creek or Bigfoot in general?
Tell us a little bit about you first. I mean, I everybody knows you. I think my first introduction to you was watching videos that Bart Catino had put out, and you were referred to as Ranger Leiterman always on the film or on the videos. And so I think people have kind of learned to know you as Ranger Robert Leiterman. So with that, tell us just a little bit about your background, how you got interested in all of this. How did you become the Bigfoot Ranger?
Well, I'll start at childhood. No, I guess about age 7, 8, I guess Patterson Film showed up, but I had an interest. I think I blame it on my father, who had an interest in those kind of things. So he talked my mom into taking all my brothers, and I have 5 brothers, over to watch this movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. And so we all piled into the van, and big Ford van, and we drove to the drive-in theater. And for some of you who don't know what that is, it's a place where you can actually drive in a vehicle, park on a little berm thing that's asphalt. Right by your window is a metal post. On this post is a speaker. You hook the speaker on your window and you turn it on, and you get to see this movie screen, and you get to listen to it. Yeah. Anyhow, so that was my first exposure, and I just remember the scene in the bathroom scared me pretty big because I had to go pee, and I had to make it all the way from the vehicle to the concession bar projection booth area and use the bathroom, and nobody wanted to go with me because they wanted to watch the movie, so it was a tough one. But since then, I guess I did a little light reading in college, and once I graduated, they started taking the subject maybe a little more seriously, but not too serious, just enough to get interested in it. So when I got involved with park rangering, and one of the assignments I did, because we also did interpretation, was to give talks about natural and cultural history. And I decided, I think in 1999, about 2000, I said, what the heck? Why don't I go ahead and give a presentation on the basic Bigfoot stuff? So I did that for a couple of years. And probably my first involvement into some serious stuff was, I think it was Labor Day weekend of 1999. It's a big holiday. A lot of people come around. And this guy shows up with this big old ship speaker, wanting to broadcast some alleged Bigfoot calls in the park. And that was interesting. So answer was no. And but I tell him to go some other place to do it. But later on, I find out, oh, by the way, that was John Freitas. Anyhow, so later on, I noticed that the BFRO had this newsletter thingy. So I saw these pictures, and the picture had this guy who reported seeing a Sasquatch, allegedly, in August 23rd of 1919. And so that's the reason that John Freitas was there with the group to go out and look around and follow up investigations for it. So I went out to find the location based on the photograph, and I found the location, and it was right across from the Burlington campground. A dad with his kid, they're out walking around, kid's shoe is untied. So dad says, tie your shoe. So he's waiting for his son to tie his shoe. And he kind of looks up the hillside, which is probably about a half mile from the campground on the other side of the river. And he sees what he reported as a half-naked individual with hair pacing back and forth and rubbing his back against what he thought was a stump. And so he they both went back down to the kiosk area, and they asked if they had any bears. They said no. So, that led to the BFRO showing up to do an investigation. That led to me meeting John Freitas, which eventually led to me going up September 23rd myself with another park aide of mine that was really good with tracking, and she taught me quite a few things. So we went back up there. I found the stump, I found an area, that ledge trackway area. I found out that one of the stumps was a burned redwood stump, and it had some moss growing on it. And they found a cigarette butt, and they found a camera strap. And according to the report, the alleged Sasquatch was rubbing his back against the stump. But there was no rub marks because the stump had some moss growing on it, and you could finger scratch it. So I found another area, some kind of spur trails, which led over to a group of smaller trees that were young redwoods. And the bark was kind of rubbed and pushed against the grain, so to speak, about a foot off the ground to about 6 foot up. So you put it all, and then there's also a spur off that kind of went down the hill and kind of crashed through some brush. So whatever it was had to jump through a bunch of stuff. And this was about September, so a lot of the duff was on the ground, which made it kind of difficult to find. So I took pictures, and I decided, hey, this is interesting. So I kind of did an informal investigation to the BFRO, Matt Moneymaker, and basically told him that it wasn't the stuff that was rubbed against. It was a couple, redwood trees off to the side. And so I sent the report in to Matt, and probably within a couple of weeks, I got a call from Matt saying, hey, you want to be curator for the BFRO? Of course, like, what's that? Oh, you get to follow up on reports and talk to people. Cool. Since I was doing it already as park ranger, for the public. And so that got me started at the BFRO. For a couple of years there, I just followed up on reports, talked to people, took reports, investigated the local ones, speculated on it, submitted them. After a couple of years, kind of got tired of doing all that. And then I got involved with the expeditions in, I want to say 2000, 2014? No, that's not right. 2004. I can't remember 2004 or 2005. Probably 2004 was the first BFRO expedition, and I got involved with that. And my job was to organize it, get it going, and that was fun. That's where I met Bart Catino. And after that, I did a few more expeditions. About 2009, I got into video filming. So I started trying to film during the expeditions. And then about 2009 to 10, I was like out of control with the video camera. And we did a lot of follow-up investigations. And I dragged Bart around with me for this. And got a bunch of videos up on the YouTube channel. And then probably about 2010-ish, we started filming looking for the film site. And basically it was Steve Stroyford and Ian Carton. But the first person I met was Stephen Stroyford in, I think, of 2007 during an event that Tom Yamarone had organized. I think it's the 45th or something. No, it was the 40th. Anyhow, so I got to meet Stephen, took him out in the woods. He talked about, looking for this film site that everybody's trying to find. And he said, sure. So my job in 2010 was to become the cameraman and just videotape their explorations and their search and document the process. Well, probably within a couple months of that, I kind of got suckered in, and I become a member of the Bluff Creek, looking for the film site, actually trying to relocate the film site. Yeah, missing. So we did that for a couple of years, and then about 2011, we figured out where it was. 2012, we invited Bill Munns and Daniel Perez to take a look at it. And then after that, about 2012, we also got involved and started the camera project, which was Jamie's lead dog on that. And during that whole process, basically following up on reports, talking to people, reading, writing. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have a trilogy of juvenile fiction on the Bigfoot phenomena. It's kind of crazy because the first book came out in 2000. Yeah, back then there wasn't that many fictional, storytelling books about it. But anyhow, and here we are today.
So, Robert, do you think your first encounter or your first follow-up inspired you to write that book?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought too much about it because prior to that, I was already doing talks and campfire talks. So I had it in the back of my mind. I was going to go ahead and do it. I started writing another book first, but it got published after the Bigfoot mystery book. And so I'd say not directly, but the timing is close, but it's not directly because in 2000 is when the Bigfoot mystery was published. But the earlier juvenile story I wrote was when I was working in the Great Valley grassland areas doing kayak patrol. And so that story was actually written before that. But I would say probably not, but it was close timing area.
Well, let me ask this real quick. I'm going to bounce back to Rowdy. And Rowdy, as a person that's involved in the film industry, why is it so important that we found, or that we would try and find this film site? I mean, it's overgrown. It doesn't look the same. It looks nothing like from 1967. What's the significance? I mean, it's cool. It's neat. It's historic. It's kind of interesting to be able to stand there. And I think it's very interesting how you all came across with how you rediscovered the site. But from a film standpoint, why is it significant?
Well, going back to the initial point of me thinking it really wasn't that important to know, how's this going to be the definitive proof, or how is it going to help us figure out if Bigfoot's real? I didn't see the importance of it at first. Come full circle now, I'm probably one of the bigger advocates on, as a lot of people are, now, on how important it is to know everything we can know about this site and how it looks and what's going on there, and exactly where everything was. And that's kind of what we've been doing, was really pinning in after these guys solidified the 2012 camp out, that we took everybody down there from Bill Munns to Daniel Perez, and everybody, I would say, blessed the site, saying, yeah, this is it. And for sure, and of course, I have to give Bill, or excuse me, Bob and Bobo and Cliff, they used to be able to walk to the site, but those guys never verified where the site was. And I was surprised on finding Bigfoot how much Bob was very aware of, yeah, this is the spot. He was recognizing things as we were walking into it. And he did a good job of telling it the way it started off. Anyway, soon after that, as we measured everything, and I saw things in the basically we're using frame 352, and we start seeing everything in that frame in the background and finding all the stumps. And we during the 2012 expedition with Munns, we tried to draw a line, or they tried to draw a line, a sight line from the Q tree, which is a leaning tree, and the smiley face through to a certain distance that I believe either John Green and DeHenden both measured, of where Patterson was. So once we figure out where he was, and we start, it's the place we have to start from if we're going to use like frame 352. So they tried to do a measurement, and they did a pretty good measurement. But at that time, in 2000, 8 years ago, or 7.5 years ago now, we had not cleared out as much brush. We had started clearing brush, and actually on that trip, right, Robert, we got everybody working. Just about everybody that went down on that trip was doing something, whether they were helping with measurements or they were trimming trees. And I think Bart and Bobo both complained about how much they had to work when they were down there. But we took advantage of everybody that was down there.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job too.
It's like bringing the goats in. You got to get started somehow. But every year since then, we've kept it going to the past, I guess, going on 3 to 4 years now, where we have a pull trimmer where we're trimming the trees and cleaning up, making it a little more fire safe down there. And in turn, we're creating a nice canopy down there that's easier to walk through. And what we're trying to do is just kind of naturally help this forest that's grown 50 years later mature in a nice way, that we can start seeing more sightlines, because there are trees down there, that are fairly big. All of us that have been down there, it's always surprising to me to see how much stuff can grow. in 50 years, because a lot of that stuff didn't start growing right after the flood, or right after the flood. It probably took 5 to 10 years for a lot of that stuff to start growing. Anyway, we've opened up and created a better sight line and found a more precise position for Roger's position when he was taking the picture, or taking the film, especially 352 when he's really stabilized. And Kipp was a part of this last summer. We kind of stepped into it. Daniel Perez has I would say a replica camera, but it's a turreted camera, the same camera that Patterson used. And we had the two lenses that it presumably could be, which is a 15 or a 25 millimeter. And I think what we need to settle, even though I feel good listening to Bob as far as describing the size of the creature and how much it weighed, we can set up and figure out exactly where everything had walked, and we have those measurements too. And we'll just try to recreate 352. But anyway, our new position, we can't see exactly where 352 is because we have, actually, I think it's a maple and several alders that have grown that are kind of blocking the position perfectly. Now, where the Munn's position was, which is about 7 feet to the right, down a little bit further, you could see actually where we think 352 position is as we start to measure it. And that's the important right now of us clearing that, is us being able to see more of these sight lines that we see in 352. We can barely see the smiley face because of all those trees. We're starting to see more of the background stumps. And ultimately, one day, it's going to take that forest to grow up. We'll start to see some of the bases of the trees that are in the background, specifically the big tree, the maple, and then the leaning tree, and then all the way over to the laurel and hardy tree, which was important to Munn's. But in turn, we had Perez's camera, and we utilized Kipp Morrill himself as Patty, and we just kind of did an impromptu. At first, I was just going to run it and just compare frames, but I loaded the camera and it was good. I had some film, just reversal film. It's still the same frame, and it's going to show up the same on the film itself. It's not the exact same kind of film, and we're not too worried about color. We're just looking for size. But it was a bit dark, and that is the difference now from when the picture or when the film was taken. Is it was completely exposed when he took it. Now it's completely covered. So we're in opposite frames. But I think we have attempted a decent attempt at comparing the 15 and the 25. We definitely need to do it again and utilize a few different things. Put Kipp in a all white, dark under trees, because I think we had it wide open, the camera itself, and it came out a little underexposed, but that was my fault too. I thought we overexposed it, so I had it run a little bit under. But what was cool is there's a few different places that still process 16 millimeter film, not the Kodachrome, but just 16 millimeter film, and he did it in a pretty timely manner, and he sends it back to you on a digital format as well as the original. But I guess what the important things that we kind of came out of that, and to be honest with you, if people go to the Facebook site, you can look at a lot of this stuff, the comparison of the 15 to the 25, and I think that's something that we're pursuing right now with the Bluff Creek Project. It's kind of come full circle back to the film site. Actually, going back to the camera project, that came out of the 2012 expedition, in which Bart and I think Stephen was there. I think Robert, you were there, right? And then,
yep. And
then who else went up to Onion Mountain?
I think Bobo was there too.
I don't know if Bobo was there. I don't think no, he wasn't. Remember that? Because we all said that sounded just like Bobo, but Bobo's not here. Okay. account up there. We won't go into that right now, but as we got out of the car, we heard something. Something happened later with Bart and I walking down a hill. There's accounts of that on different people's podcasts, and we'll talk about it one day. But anyway, that next weekend, I found a parallel trail above that, and Jamie had some cameras, and he goes, put some cameras up there. Let's see what's up there. So I stuck some cameras, and he had made these little stakes that you could stick in the ground. And I came back, I think it was probably only about 2 weeks later, and got the cameras and just had incredible bear footage. And Jamie's like, let's put a bunch of these down at the film site and start covering it. And that set off from there. And eventually, thousands of videos later, we've got a pretty good catalog of what kind of animals are down there. But going back to the film real quick, to give my conclusion right now, the 15 and the 25 millimeter, there's just no way it's the 25 millimeter. We're in the right spot, and we're watching Kipp walk by. You're bigger than Patty and the 25 millimeter within a few feet of frame 352. And if you see the comparison in the 15 millimeter, you're smaller than Patty, but if anything, it's a 15 millimeter or a 20 millimeter from what it looks like, unless you are bigger than Patty.
Which I like to think that maybe I'm actually not. I have been trying to watch my weight. Just kidding. Yeah. But I think it goes be an opportunity to kind of point out that the film site, it's on public land. It's in the Six Rivers National Forest. It's in a very remote location. As you can imagine, it's visited quite often by people who are Bigfoot enthusiasts or historic or interested in the history. But I think it also needs to be mentioned that because it's so remote, that when people are interested in going, they need to make sure that there is no cell coverage there. There is very hard to get any kind of radio signal. And so to be extremely prepared by letting people know that they're going out there. Of course, the time frames for when the opportunity to go down are fairly limited because of the Port Orford disease that they're trying to prevent the Forest Service. So there's gates at about 10 miles out from the site that restrict people from coming in and out. But just to mention that,
that from October. What they have officially on their sheet is October 21st to the 1st of June. That place is closed off. You can't get into the Bluff Creek drainage. There are roads around the Bluff Creek drainage you can get to or get through on the Go Road or Cedar Camp, but a lot of times there's snow this time of year too. But that in turn, that's added to our game camera project. Just the fact that there's nobody out there for 8 months out of the year. Animals are not being bothered or with cars driving by and going on. A lot of people going to the film site. Robert, what do you think? What do you think our average is up to this year? As far as what I see on our game cameras, I don't think there's more than 20 to 25 people at most visiting the site each year.
Yeah, I probably have to agree with that because we got deployed in a position to capture people going up and down. And
now a lot of people go, and they don't quite make it. Yeah, there's a few of those.
Yeah, like I remember the first time I went there, I couldn't find the film site, and I had directions. It's kind of confusing though, in a way. So, it's like Kipp said, it's not easy terrain to navigate sometimes if you're not familiar with the area.
Exactly. Yeah, especially if it's your first time walking in. And it was your second time, I think, too. So you still missed it on your second time.
The second time, the first time I missed it, we were downstream. The second time was actually when me and Austin, a friend of mine, we ran into Cliff and Bobo, and Tom and Terry, and I missed it that time. And the third time, finally got it.
So the getting to the film side is tough, and I would suggest getting a hold of us sometimes if you don't feel like you can navigate or read any of our directions, because there's quite a bit of information online, at our Bluff Creek blog spot and on the Bluff Creek Facebook page. And we got Instagram. What else we got? All that information's on there somewhere. Even the exact latitude and longitude, which is there still contention on what exactly that is, Robert?
Well, I took my Garmin GPS unit, set it up for a few hours at my tent site when I was working on the project in on October 30th of 2011. And I pretty much took it, and I have it written down, and that is the Garmin lat longs, I guess, Oregon style. And yeah, if you go over and try to do Google Earth, you're not going to get the same measurements off that. Yeah, we even took a GPS reading over just below in front of the big tree. I don't know how accurate that one is going to be, but it's better than somebody who hasn't been to the site. That was set up for quite a while too, just sitting there while we did some work, and we just wrote down the reading afterwards. So we took it from two separate locations off the main north-south meridian line.
Question.
Yeah.
Is Patty real, or is that somebody in a suit?
Well, it depends who you talk to.
But Robert, I mean, are you convinced 100% that's a real creature, or do you think that there's a chance that it could be somebody in this suit?
Yeah.
If so, how big do you think they are?
You're starting to sound like Bart here. I'm just going to digress for a little bit. I've been out a lot, and weird stuff happens. And you sit there when things happen, and you always have to ask that question. Is that a natural phenomena, or did something do that? Like we're over in the Redwood coastal areas, and it's like Bart and Bobo had gone up a month before, and they went to a certain location, and a bunch of stuff happened around them. Knocks returning, things moving. It kind of flanked them out, and they left. And a month later, Bart and I went up the same general area to see what's going on. So we got in just before the moon was going to come up, and then when it got dark, we were all set up. And we did some instigative techniques where basically is you can call or you can knock. And you do this to instigate a response of some kind. So we're out, and we usually do this. And Bart likes to run his therm. I like to do night vision. We work as a team, tandem team. And so we're sitting on this location on the side of the hill in this ancient redwood forest, being quiet. And we're just sitting there. And it's time. So I think Bart did a call first or a knock. I can't remember. But you got nothing back. And then 7 minutes goes by, and then it's time for us to do something else. So we try another instigative technique. I can't remember if it was a knock or call. And within about a little more than 3 minutes, I don't know the exact time on it, we get a return knock. And it's pretty clear. It sounds like somebody took a baseball bat, it's a nice slugger bat, found a nice acoustically tuned tree, and just whacked the heck out of it, probably about a quarter mile away at most, if not closer. And it's like, well, that was unusual. So we're quiet. 7 minutes go by. We try something else. And we do another instigative technique. And right above us, within about 3 minutes-ish, just above us, probably within 100 yards or so, a sound of a tree falling down, tree failure. It's almost like it's pushed over or it fell down. It's a forest. Trees fell down. Unusual. So the unique thing was it happened within 3.5 to 3 minutes of us doing the instigative technique. We got a response of some kind. And it didn't happen after that, after the tree got pushed over. So nothing else. It was over. The show was over. So Bart kept asking me, well, what do you think now? What do you think now? Much like Kipp here. And that's one. And then you got rocks tossed at you. And then you got other calls and sounds you hear. There's samurai talk. There's foot impressions. So all these things add up to something unusual. And I'm not an expert. I don't know if there's very many Bigfoot experts running around, but a lot of people think they're Bigfoot experts. But that's still a field that needs to be, figured out. So do I think there's something unusual to these things? Oh, you bet I do. the more time you spend in the outdoors, the more weird stuff you start seeing and hearing and experiencing. But I haven't seen a Sasquatch walk by and, shake my hand and says I'm a Sasquatch. I've had things tossed, called, samurai talk, tracks. Of course, there's this feeling of being, stalked. Yeah, I definitely am being stalked. Could be by a mountain lion, a bear, a mouse. There's animals out there all the time. And the answer to that is, I think there's something out there. I don't know what it is. And for us to sit here and say it's all BS is kind of silly, because we're still learning about a lot of things. Why would every continent, pretty much in the world we live in, have some stories of some bipedal large individual, a family of them, or solos running around doing their thing?
Yep.
But there's a lot of people who spend a lot of time in the outdoors now, right? What is their skill set? Well, they watch Finding Bigfoot, they watch Expedition Bigfoot, they watch all the other shows. Well, that is a source of experience and training, I guess. But we used to be a culture that used to know the outdoors very well. We could predict the weather by looking at the sky. We knew what to eat, what would make us sick, what would help us. We lost a lot of those skill sets. And so when we get out in the woods, we're scared to death lots of times of the unknown, is what we don't know. Back in the old days, back when we used to drag our knuckles around, you had to find a place at night to hide because it was safe there, because the darkness was scary and unknown. And so now we're talking about the Sasquatch creature being a nocturnal animal, although a lot of sightings were daylight, like Patty's. So you have something running around in the day and night that was able to cloak out and disappear. And they always talk about how much evidence you got. Where's the DNA? Where's this? Where's that? And the science part of me is always going, yeah, where is it? Beyond reasonable doubt. Where are the facts? And then the other part of me goes, there's so much to this strange world we live in. The shamans played a role. People were seers. People can predict the future. Is that all luck? So the scary thing is you look at all these storybooks. Was it Hans Christian Andersen? Yeah, he wrote these nice little touchy-feely, scary stories for kids, right? And to think about, even now they're finding some fossil remains, some weird-looking animals. And now, in terms of history of mankind, they're finding a bunch of weird skeletons that lived at the same time period as the other weird skeletons they're finding. So maybe there is a little bit of truth to all this crazy stuff we've been hearing. And if you think about it, you're out there by your campfire at night, sharing stories, trying to, getting caught up again, and you hear a bump in the night. I mean, maybe around.
Yeah, true.
Back to you.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Well, I think Kipp, the original question was, why do you think that is a real Bigfoot in the Patterson-Gimlin film? And that is the best question, because it's still the best video or film or any kind of picture that we have. When they pulled those stills off of that, that's the best shot of any Bigfoot we're going to get. And, contrary to belief, they initially say that the film is overexposed. Yeah, the sandbar is really bright. But if he didn't have that exposure, we would not have the detail that we see that's on the creature. And I've grown up playing sports, training people in sports, coaching, and I can tell you one thing, that's definitely muscle and not padding throughout most of that body. Now the butt, yeah, that's something different there, but I tell people, when you live in an area, as we all know, this is one of the steeper areas in America. It's hard to go up and down, and you got to have an incredible ass muscle, gluteus maximus, to step up and go up a mountain fast. And I think that's all that this creature has, is just a enormously developed gluteus maximus for exit, which is going up a hill. The more I look at the film, the more the fur, hair, whatever you want to call it, looks good. It's got the right rub marks. People are starting to bring that up now. That's all stuff I noticed. The frame-by-frame progression that I looked at originally with Stephen and Robert back in 2011. It looked to me like her, what I'm calling it to her because she does have breast, her hackles raise. And when she looks back, I think the first time and realizes that they're coming across towards her, or he's pursuing towards her, you can see a progression of her hackles kind of rising. Now it could be just the angle of her walking is changing a little bit, but I see hackles raised on her. And to me, when I saw that progression, I was like, that's just too good to be a suit for that time to get that kind of definition that you and I would have. And if somebody was furry or had a lot of hair on them, like a dog, those hackles raise up because the muscle under there tenses up and brings those hairs standing up, and it's tension. Once I saw that, that's really what sucked me into this could be a real creature just because of the anatomy that's showing. The breast, I can't speak to that, but the leg everything in the leg looks great. You can see the proper tendons, the calves. Now, initially, when people saw this film, all you saw was a pretty small creature walking across at the bottom of the film. And it wasn't that big, and they think it's blurry and all that, and that's not true. It's a 16 millimeter. And if it was a 15 millimeter, you hardly have to focus that to get everything in focus, because it's probably shooting at an incredibly high f-stop, f22, which is a real small pinpoint hole that everything's in focus. So it's in focus. And when they pulled those stills off of it, that's the telltale to me. The progression and how she walked, how fast she walked, it's definitely, well, I can't say it's definitely, but I don't believe the film was shot in 24 frames per second. It was probably shot in 16 or 18, and the difference between a 16 and an 18 frame film when it's projected is very net. You can't notice it. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between those two as they're played back. So I think he would be running at a 16 or an 18 to conserve film, because he had a limited supply of those rolls. It'd be great to see all the rolls, and I think that's something that we're eventually going to do is also try to pinpoint those spots that are earlier in that reel one along the way, which we've walked a few times, and it's a trip now because you have to wade through the creek. Back then there was a nice road that was probably just a few years cut, so it was pretty soft, but I guess they had a slide, and we have on one of our drone videos. But yeah, to me, the film itself is still the best proof we have. Now we have all this physical evidence and eyewitnesses. Now, being an advanced producer on finding Bigfoot for the few shows I did, I talked to a lot of people that were very convincing, and I'm really into the older people giving their older stories, because as shows like this came out, it became less taboo to talk about something that might have happened to you many years ago that you would have been ridiculed, so you just kept it to yourself. So I'm really interested in those, and I've talked to a few loggers locally as well as in other places over in Shasta, and there's just too many people that are seeing these things, and it again goes back to Native history. There's a grain of truth in just about everything, especially legends. You just got to figure out what it is. But yeah, going back to it, it's the film. It's definitely good. And to me, that's becoming a real creature. Yeah, you could probably make a suit that had some good money backing and time. But here you go. You got to attribute two cowboys like that do that. They're probably pretty crafty guys. That's a possibility. That's why I can't commit to 100%. I'm 90 because we're still at that no physical evidence point. But we might have that physical evidence too, and it may not be recognized yet. So
Interesting point.
Yeah,
I had
I'd like to
just
bring up something else
been working
too.
up in. Oh,
good,
go ahead.
good.
We're interviewing you. Go ahead, Rob.
No, go ahead. You first. Okay, I'll go.
I was
All
just
right.
going to mention real quick that I was going to mention that I was on a work detail and I actually visited the Cliff and Melissa Barrickman's North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon. Walked in. It's amazing the way that it's put together. It's for Bigfoot people and non-Bigfoot people alike. Was just a really great experience. When I walked in, and one of the things that I got to see was probably one of the best interviews of Bob Gimlin that I've ever seen. And it was done in a short video by our very own Tate Hieronymus. So
Awesome.
I thought that was
Awesome.
really, really interesting and such a great job.
I just saw the live walkthrough that they did, and what a pair of people. Just a perfect match, and to create something like that is great. And that's exciting.
If you haven't, it's definitely worth stopping in. And as you can imagine, and I think one of the first things that I walked away from thinking is, this was not cheesy. This was done, and I wouldn't have expected anything less from Cliff or Melissa. They're just really intelligent, sharp people, dedicated to what they're doing. And it was just, the gift shop is a lot of fun. As you can imagine, a lot of novelty items, but the way that it was set up, it was such, as I said, it was interesting for people who are very interested in Bigfoot, and then for people that are just exploring and interested. But Tate, your interview of Bob Gimlin was fantastic. That short video,
Yeah,
the movie that you did,
that's
was
at the
great.
museum. You said, right?
It is.
Yeah, because the full interview is actually 6 minutes. But what's in the short film that I did for the Bluff Creek Project is only like 1 minute and 32 seconds. And so I didn't want the full interview released publicly on the internet. So I was like, I'll send it to Cliff, and you can see the full interview for now there. North American Bigfoot Museum in Boring, Oregon.
Yeah, it's an outstanding place.
Yeah,
Cliff, I didn't mean to jump in and Robert.
Too late.
Go, Rob. Sorry,
Yes.
I started calling you
Okay.
Cliff.
That's okay.
Hello.
I just wanted to bring up the first time I met Kipp. Was basically on an expedition, and a Bigfoot expedition. It was Bart had a thermal sighting at the kill site in Sierra Nevadas. So he had this thermal sighting that he had taken, and he sent it down. Say, hey, check this out. This is what I got. It's pretty cool. So he sent it down, and I looked at it with Rowdy, and we watched. He had like 3 segments in varying in lengths, I guess up to 10 minutes of some of those, and we sat there, we looked at it, and we go, oh look. It's got to be a bird flying by, or somebody, he says a rock was tossed. It looks like oh, what's this thing? He says it's a creature standing there. Oh, it looks like a freaking fire ring. So anyhow, I did my little investigative write up for it. And then Bart goes, hey, why don't you come on down and investigate it? Because normally Bart and I go to Washington about this time to check out with the VFR Washington crew. We did that a few years in a row. And this time we changed our mind. We decided to go to the place where Bart had his therm sighting and investigate it. So Kipp was invited along, and I know why he invited Kipp, because Kipp's actually 6'3", and he needed somebody to stand it. Just like Rowdy was taking advantage of Kipp's size to stand in to help with be doing the patty film. We did the same thing at the kill site. So it's kind of interesting where we try to recreate what we thought could have done it, and right down to running the therm again, like the tossing of the rocks or a bird, as we thought. We walked around the site looking for objects we could heat up that would fly through the air. Like we found smashed beer cans. Those don't fly very well, but they heat up pretty nicely. We had some cones from the local fir trees. They're good size. Actually, I think they're white pines. And those didn't turn out so well. They don't fly very well. They don't look like the thermal image. Then, of course, there were cow pies. We decided not to collect those and throw those because they don't stick together very well. And the wet ones, they kind of blow up. The dry ones fly like Frisbees, so they were out. But we did find some rocks. And we were able to heat up the rocks. I think originally we had one of the volunteers speed up on it and kind of heat some rocks up and toss them. But anyhow, what I'm trying to get at with the project is that's where I met Kipp. We spent a lot of time being investigators for we were up there for 5 days.
We did, and yeah, it was really interesting to finally meet. It was interesting to meet a lot of the people that I had read about and heard about, and it was always it was kind of I guess it would have been my introduction into the research end of things, getting to know people, and that's ultimately what led me back to being involved. Not as involved because I don't live in the area with the Bluff Creek Project, but certainly I enjoy coming out and with you guys and supporting however I can when I can. So yeah, so it's just really interesting how all these relationships have kind of sparked because of interest in this whole subject. I believe I met Rowdy at an expedition that was just outside of the Crescent City, and then of course after that, been spending a lot of time at Laos, haven't we, Rowdy?
Yeah, that was Mill Creek, I believe, right?
Yep, that's Mill Creek.
It was.
Yeah, with Robert and his. Let's find the coldest spot to camp. Yeah, difficult.
Yeah, that was kind of nice.
That was fun though. We got to drive around in Kipp's nice truck, and we had this R2D2 thermal unit on top, and it was high style Bigfooting, man. We had the whole place to ourselves, and yeah, that was pretty cool.
I remember Roe freezing his little things off. And so we had all our extra clothes we had to give to Roe, and we finally went to check on his tent. He had this dome tent, no rain fly, and he was inside, and he had all these clothes piled on top of him just so he would freeze to death.
He somehow got down into water too. I don't know if there was water under him or everything was saturated inside. Yeah, poor guy. It was, Anyway, that was fun, and I believe Kipp and Robert made an attempt to go to the infamous Twin Lakes with a camper or with an RV trailer.
Oh God!
And that was it. You get thrown into the Bluff Creek Project. You get thrown into Bart's high intensity investigation for 6 days. You guys are out there. And then the first Bluff Creek Project thing, you got to brave the snow with an RV with Robert egging you on. Let's go a little further.
That was an interesting time.
I still think that was a great trip.
That.
We went up there about.
It turned into an adventure. That's where they should be.
3,000 feet.
It could actually be said.
Kipp goes. Hey, Kipp goes.
Robert is always telling me. Robert's always telling me, well, let's go on a hike. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, we'll be sitting in Laos camp. And Rob will say, well, let's go for this hike. And I'll say, oh, okay, well, how long and how far? He's, oh, it's not far. We're just going to go for just a little while. And okay, where at? Oh, it's just up this hill. It's not that far. So I will, of course, be led along because, well, Robert sounds like he knows exactly what he's talking about. And 6 hours later, and sprained ankle or anything else, I'll find out that it was actually a little more to it and a little more exciting than I had really planned for. And that was probably the same thing with the trailer. And Robert, now I've got my little truck and I'm pulling this trailer. And where are we headed? We're just going to go up this road. Oh, what is it? It's called Slate Creek. Oh, it's all paved. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds good enough. Well, it's also probably one of the most steep paved grades that I've ever taken my truck on, let alone the trailer. And as we get to the top, it's pouring rain and it starts to snow. And I said, I think we're going to park here. But it ended up being a great trip. Of course, Robert's always teaching me things about tracking animals, and, those types of things. We ate well. I had brought some chili. I think it was the first time that Robert had ever camped where he actually got to watch a movie. We did pretty well, and it was a great trip. And as most trips are, when they're not as planned, they tend to be more memorable, and that's certainly part of how it was. So
yes, Kipp always brings a next level of decadence to going to Bluff Creek.
Having been a firefighter for the last 30 years, it's been. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's your show. Do you remember when we went up the Twin, almost made it? We pulled over, snowed on us, and then I say, "Let's go for a walk," and you did, and it was snow. It was fun, and then we went for a drive the next day. Weather got better, and we're driving over out of Twin. Remember finding those tracks in the snow? It looked like human tracks. Do you remember?
That's right. And you said, let's stop and let's educate ourselves on this. And we pulled over, and you pointed out to me what a double tapped bear print looks like.
Yeah, at first they did look like human tracks, which always makes you go, really? And then we drove farther along, and as we got to better snow, we realized they were actually mountain lion tracks, and they had melted back to make the perfect human-like footprints. Do you remember that? That was pretty fun.
I do. I was not convinced they were. I thought perhaps they were probably something. I thought that there was a barefooted midget running around in the woods, and Robert kept on telling me, no, there's no barefooted midgets running around. I said, well, why are there prints here? So that was hard to. We finally got it figured out. I think it would be interesting to tell our guests our audience that these places that we're talking about Louse Camp, we're talking about Twin Lakes, we're talking about Cedar Camp, all these different locations. When we're talking about the Bluff Creek Project, obviously the main film site is a huge focus of much of the project, but the project also involves putting out these trail cameras at different locations at different times and having the ability to check them when the gates are closed and some other things. And so I don't know if you could expand on that a little bit, Rowdy, and kind of go into explaining what that's all about.
Yeah, I might have to change over my microphone real quick here. But the game camera project, actually we have a few cameras that we can get to that are not behind the lock gates. But most of our cameras are pretty much in a novel location as far as covering Patty's Path, or as far as the whole scenic flat there that you see in frame 352. A few cameras down there and then on the trail end, and then we have a few up on the lake areas. And we've had up to, I think, 18 cameras, almost 20 cameras at one time. But you get an array of cameras, and if people out there that have worked with trail cameras, there's not a lot of them early on that were very dependable or very good. And they've gotten better and more dependable. And we just kind of stuck with this one camera. And we try to utilize view sheds that have good video capabilities, which means you're going to get some action of whatever walks in front of it for an extended period of time, instead of just walking in front of it and tripping a camera and getting one still shot of it. So instead of that, we try to utilize looking down longer trail paths or known. Our trail actually is basically the bottom game trail, the creek. So it basically, we just accentuated that. And we have a few cameras on there, and we get a lot of action, like we were saying earlier. 8 months of the year, nobody's down there. Nobody's visiting that site. Now, we've done one reconnaissance after the gates closed. And I think that's the only time we've made that attempt to get in there behind locked gates.
Well, expanding on that a little bit,
I'm going to miss him dearly.
Rob, I know that I've focused on this before because I'm so interested in it, with the fact that you have been camped out at the film site by yourself, which a lot of people are like, what's the big deal? But you are in a very remote location. You're in a very famous historic site that's known for one thing. And there you went down in your tent and spent the night all by yourself. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, part of the neat thing about investigating the film site location was you spend a lot of time traveling from your vehicle downhill, over a berm, down a hill, or up the creek to your place. It's nice every once in a while just go ahead and camp in place. When I say camp, I just mean you find a nice place, you set your tent. We don't have any fires because we don't want to scar the place up, and you just kick back. And being by yourself, solitude has its virtues. You're quiet. You can think about a lot of stuff. I highly recommend people do some sovereign trips and sit back and spend some time to themselves to reconnect. Well, place I picked out was pretty nice, and this one place in particular was pretty much on the pathway of every game animal up there. Of course, we didn't know that. I didn't know that until afterwards when we set the cameras up. We started checking footage. You go, yeah, the mountain lion, the bears love this place. So I set my tent up, was pretty much directly in the line of the game trail. They know how to bypass surrounding, which is, that's the way it goes. But yeah, out there, it's like the foxes are pretty adamant. They know you're there, and they let you know they're there. And foxes can make some pretty weird noises. And you always get the feeling of being watched, which you are. You're the visitor. You're in their living room, and they're waiting for you to leave so they can sanitize the couch when you go. But yeah, there's a few pretty scary places sometimes.
And Robert,
wow,
what you guys were out in Bluff Creek, and you and your wife were out there, and you said you were using your elk collar, and you got something pretty interesting too.
Yeah, pretty much in the general area. I don't like giving away too many locations because we all need places that are pretty much special to us. And I can understand why people don't like giving away places they go to for special experiences, because then you tell people, and then it's kind of like a drive-in movie theater. Everybody's there to watch it, So you kind of keep it. But anyhow, so my tradition now is in this general area, I like to go there with I have an elk collar. I'm not very good at it, but you don't have to be to be able to make noise with it. So I make a few calls. I do that just at dusk. And then I take out my flute and I do a little flute playing, kick back. And I've done that a few times. And this time in particular, business as usual. Rowdy was supposed to drop in on us, but he stayed at the top of this road section. So it was just my wife and I. And about 3-ish in the morning, I kind of hear, I'd say it's kind of a voice. And I won't say what it said, but I'll pass on that one. And then it kind of wakes you up, and you're like, "What?" And you always ask that question: is that all in my head? Did I imagine everything? Of course, my wife is still sleeping; she didn't hear a thing. So I go, maybe just imagining it. Go back to sleep again. It wasn't that long, and I heard "Buenos dias," and it's like, "Oh, what?" And it's like, "Oh, look, a bilingual Sasquatch," or was somebody in the area there? Well, that location in particular is not very populated, and it's on the side of a mountain, and you have a canyon below you, and you have the road access where another vehicle was parked, and that was Rowdy's. That's about 2 miles away. And so, yeah, that was just bizarre. It goes on the long list of weird stuff that you experience, and you kind of wonder what it is. There's another section along on Bluff Creek, downstream from the film site, about if you were to leave the 12 and 13 bridge, within about a mile-ish to a mile and a half, there's a feeder creek that puts in the side, and it widens up. The canyon widens and makes a sharp turn. I've hiked that canyon so many times, and this one in particular, by myself. And this one in particular, I was just walking back, And I heard pretty clear, which sounded like ladies talking and laughing. You're like, huh? So I could pinpoint where it was coming from. And we all know the river makes noises. Water pushes sticks come back. It hits rocks. It all talks to you all the time, but it did not sound like women talking and giggling. So I went over to go check it out. So I walk up across the creek, go to the canyon section. I announce myself. I look around at soft sand. There's a couple holding water ponds. Just deer tracks. Nothing. The canyon goes up pretty steep canyon. The question always comes, did you hear somebody else talking somewhere else and the sounds came down the canyon? Well, they have to come pretty much, I would say, about maybe 2 miles down the canyon in order to be heard from the 12 and 13 road, which is on the back side of the ridge. But there are some spur roads off that are not very accessible. I went with Rowdy doing the $10 million Bigfoot bounty, and we tried some of those to try to put up a radio repeater to keep communication going. So anyhow, I went back to where I first heard it, and I sat there for a good 15, 20 minutes, and I listened. And all I heard was the creek. I heard the kingfishers. I heard the dippers. I watched the dippers. Did not hear that sound again. And that was totally bizarre. So yeah, that's another thing that you kind of makes you wonder. I remember also over at Louse Camp that some guys drove in. We went to go talk to them. I was with a former retired ranger, and we're listening, and we hear what sounds like bass going on. You know, it's like we all know that the grouse can make that bass sound, but it sounded distant and different. And both he and I both heard it. And that was another unusual thing. That's just a couple. But yeah, the more time you spend out in the woods, the more chance you have of hearing stuff that's kind of hard to explain. Of course, we always rationalize it and we come up with a nice answer. But sometimes I begin to wonder, the more time I spend out there, the more weird stuff goes on. I don't have an explanation for it. So it's just one of those things.
So, Robert, you've worked on the movie Willow Creek by Bobcat Goldthwait. Talk a little about that.
Well, that was like right after our Bigfoot blowout in 2012. We spent like 4 days on the film site, maybe 5. And we just like after Bill Munns left, we went back up to Perez and Ian, and we did a bunch of stump measurements to the background trees to tie in some good measurements. And then we were done with that. We went over to Willow Creek. We decided to, eat at the restaurant, kick back at the bar. And then we're at the bar, and I had noticed that Terry and Todd were talking to this young lady. And then soon afterwards, she came over to talk to us. And they were filming this lost camera movie. Anyhow, so they asked for some volunteers, some people to be in the background. So, of course, we signed our lives away, and we did. So we sat there at the bar in the far corner while this gentleman stood on a table and played a ukulele and sang a really cool Bigfoot song that he made up the night before. Anyhow, so after that shoot was all done, we thought it was kind of fun. We didn't know anybody. We didn't know where the guy was filming. And we went back to the other side where the pool tables were, kicking back. And then again, here's Terry Smith and Todd Hale. They're kind of kicking back and talking to the same brunette. And Terry goes, "Oh, here he is." So I got suckered in, thanks to Terry and Todd. I got suckered in to help this crew film a movie about Bigfoot. And so eventually I got to meet this guy, Bobcat Goldthwait. I mean, I didn't know who the name doesn't sound familiar at all, but it had to be explained to me that Police Academy. I was like, oh. I still didn't.
Oh.
Yeah, so I wouldn't know any connection if it wasn't for Ian explaining it to me. And so we said, sure, which means that means I volunteered Ian, I volunteered my son to go back up for a couple more days to take these guys and gals who weren't really prepared to go camp out overnight to a Bigfooty, squatchy little place that was supposed to be a safe place that gets a wild feel that they could film. So I said, why not go to Louse Camp? So they said, sure, where is it? Oh, it's just up the road. right, Kipp?
They utilized it.
So we took them. We took them to Louse Camp and took them to Ground Zero, and they got a chance to film. So we're kicking back around the fire, and I've worked on several movie shoots before and car commercials where my job is to make sure they don't destroy the resource. So a lot of standing around and telling them no or yes. So I'm sitting by the fire. They're all talking. I'm waiting for them to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm like, what are they going to do? So finally I ask, out of curiosity. So they say, oh, yeah, we're going to shoot a night scene. I says, okay, well, what are you going to kind of do? So of course, Bobcat goes, yeah, we're going to do some calls. So he lets out this call. And I said, that's nice and all, but it's not what Bigfooters are expecting to hear. And he goes, well, what would you do? I says, well, I do like the, how? Well, how does that go? So I said, well, it goes like this. So I do that, and they go, okay, you got the job. And I go, I didn't want the job, but, okay. And the next thing was, you guys going to do like knocks? Yeah, knocks, like hit things. So I gave a crash course on knocking 101. There was an acoustically tuned orchard cedar stump nearby, so we used that. And it was the same guy that was playing the ukulele on the table, so he got pretty good at that. And then we did a few other things, and of course I told Bigfoot stories, ghost stories for a couple hours to get them in the mood. And then it was dark, and it was close to 10, and it was time to film. So they had set the tent up right at the entrance to Louse Camp on the right-hand side, right where the old road cut. They used to be the Bluff Creek Road, the one that Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson tried to escape on that fateful day and got stuck and had to get the heavy equipment to pull it back out. And Bob almost froze to death, but he drank lemon water and honey or something to save him. But so they had to test it up. So our job eventually became to scare them, I guess. So they were inside the tent. They had a recorder going there filming themselves. And we got to listen to everything they did. So when they would talk, we would make noise. When they would move around, we'd make noise. That's the way the real world is. You can't hear anything, but you're too busy talking, so you don't hear all the cool calls because Leiterman's talking all the time. And so it's just like, it was perfect. So we had great, we approached, we threw things, we pushed on the tent, we, did all sorts of fun stuff. And at the very end, I got to do some calls, okay, we're tired of torturing you and we're leaving. So I did a few distant calls, and that was pretty cool. It was kind of funny when I got back, and I had a radio too. So after there's a silence after I made the last call, it's funny to get this call back going. Was that you? No. I was waiting for you guys to tell me when to call. So that was fun. And then they did some shots around the camp, utilizing the resources, trying to the jump in the water scene was there. The tent all broken down. The sock hanging on the branch was there. I'm lost walking around, the arguments. A lot of it was filmed there, which is pretty cool. The last part of the film, I didn't have any help with, but I didn't like the last part, but I wasn't associated with helping it. But it was kind of a fun experience. I got Ian suckered in, my son got a chance to meet the actors, and I thought 3/4 of it was pretty cool. And unfortunately, I have to listen to my calls forever. Towards the very end, they kind of kept doing those, overlaying those calls, which is like it's a whole freaking herd of Sasquatches out there hunting down the poor people.
Yeah, you're definitely the touch they needed, Robert. I don't know what they would have done without you, man.
You guys also,
yeah, they would have had an interesting movie.
You guys also worked on the movie After Earth, or had some part in that, right?
Yeah, my job was to stand around and tell them, no, don't stop. You can't get there. No, you can't come over here. No, Rowdy had more of a role in that. I just told people that what they cannot do and protect the resources, which is crazy. 150 people walking up a trail where it's a lush, overgrown redwood sorrel and ferns, and trying to get them to film at several locations on this loop trail that's a half-mile long without destroying the resource. That's a challenge. Yeah. But I think they as a film crew, they did fine.
And you guys were going to supposedly take Will Smith and his son out squatching, right?
No, actually that was M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. One of M. Night Shyamalan's first scripts was about a Bigfoot. He said a kid like in a well and a Bigfoot or something like that. but he was definitely interested in the subject, and soon because I start working with the director and the cinematographer and the producers early because I'm a scout, so we'll go out and look at locations and find feasible locations that fit their script and also fit what's going to work for the park or with a movie crew that size. Anyway, once he found out I was into that, and then he met Robert, and I said, well, yeah, Robert and I've been kind of working on this thing, and the history of that. He was very interested and wanted to go, and I think he would have went, but he and his family had a day out, and I think his wife and his girls, I believe, probably chickened out, which might have been good because we were in a pretty scary spot that we were going to meet him. So it was definitely going to be fun. It's all good, but yeah, Robert and I actually we've met, before any of this Bigfoot stuff really kicked in for me, and because Robert worked in the park, and I would deal with the rangers and as far as walking around and looking for stuff, and then also as we're shooting, the rangers are there to monitor, and I'll usually be on set too. But he and I had that history way before we got into Bigfoot, so it was interesting working on those kind of films. When he worked on the Willow Creek, I heard about it, but I just spent those 4 days, almost 5 days out doing the survey with everybody and on the 2012, and I was tired, man. I was like, go for it, Robert, have fun. And it turned out really good, though. Like I said, that film I don't think would have been as good at the end without Robert. And that's typically what happens on the films that come out here is, even though the whole film wasn't shot here, the redwoods in this area just really take over and accentuate the film, or either play a major role in why it does well or looks well.
Yeah, I love it. Before we go, the Bluff Creek Project is in the process of writing a book, I believe, right?
Yes.
What's the time on that, or how's that going?
Well, it's I think it's going by fine. It's kind of originally I kind of wanted to do it, then I tried to talk people into contributing articles, which is
what?
Try to talk people into doing yeah, and anyhow, so I talked to Ian. Ian's going to try to commit some stuff because Ian's that missing player in the story where he doesn't quite agree with us on the film side. Then he has family issues and he can't join us or Rowdy and I for that one day when we gridded it out and pretty much found all the evidence. So it's a tough one, but the whole idea of the book is called Patterson Gimlin, the Bluff Creek Project, Journey of Rediscovery. And I hope I said that right because I keep changing my mind on that. But anyhow, so it's basically the journals and parts of the videos that we use to get the dialogue right. And it's just our journey of trying to figure out where it was and what was the pros and cons and the positive and the negative and the intermixing of the problems between our group. And it's just covers the time period from about 2010 to about 2012, and which includes the start of the camera project too, and pretty much in 2012. And so it's kind of fun reliving that and reading all and watching the videos and looking up all the stuff and coming up with dates and times and places and what's going on. But the other part is it's not like watching 72 episodes of an average of about 8 to 10 minutes long of us tripping over each other, getting lost in the forest and not knowing where we're going, according to some viewers. But it's nice to talk about when we discover something or rational as to what opinion we had or why we felt that way. It was kind of nice to explain that. Like people always ask me, well, how much of the film site's left there? So I had to figure it out mathematically. And I mean, talking about math is not my strong point. An example would be when Rowdy and I were going to grid the map out. I mean, the film site out. I had this great idea. I'm going to cut into little blocks and then label them. So Rowdy goes, you ever heard of algebra? I was like, what? Yeah, X, Y axis. Oh, I forgot about that. Thank you, Rowdy. You saved me like 16 hours with that. Anyhow, so it was kind of fun to apply some math and map it out, drawing the map.
It's not algebra, but that's
matching
okay.
the old yeah. That's why you shouldn't do anything by yourself, which brings us back to this book we're working on, Rowdy. I'm still waiting for your submission.
I'm writing it right
Rowdy,
now. Yeah.
of your opinion on the film set. Yeah. Rowdy's our camera guy. He's our camera expert. It'd be nice to have some of that information about. We start talking about whether it's a 20 millimeter, whether it's 25 or 15, and 20 sounds good, but I could say that. Who are you? You don't even want to take a picture. Well, Rowdy said it. Okay, well, let's hear it from Rowdy's mouth. So perfect. And also, Steven has some stuff to contribute to that too. Ian's going to submit his stuff. Jamie has some stuff. The thing is that all of us talking and all the video recordings of us along the journey is all pretty much in the book. And so everybody gets a chance to say and share because they're all part of the story. And if it wasn't for every member of this group, we probably would have taken so much longer to figure out what we did. So I think everybody, so 5 of us, were pretty vital for that. Yeah, and the part about Ian, though, he had come across right before we gridded out the map site, and he was really adamant it was downstream. And I've searched that. I went out with Rip and searched it. I went out with even Ian and Steven. I showed him some places there. I spent a lot of time, and there was no way it's there. But Ian was pretty adamant because he saw something he liked. And so, anyhow, as the story goes, so I kind of wanted him to submit something to explain why at the time there was 4 of us, and 75% of the people felt this was a film site, and 25% said no. Here I am with graphs again. And why should anybody else believe 75% of a group when 25% of that group says it's not the place? Anyhow, so the story is fun. We're hoping to have it out this year. We got to organize some photos and get some permission for some really cool photos, just went because we're brain dead.
Hendon's picture.
Burn DeHenden and Hey Green, where they took some great photos, and we use those photos to help determine the artifacts of the site. So it'd be very nice to be able to get copyrights on those and be able to use them. But well, we'll see how it goes.
Well, it sounds like there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out soon.
No, well, I guess Perez is working on something too, which is kind of nice.
It'll be exciting.
In the very beginning. Yeah, in the very beginning, Perez was not so sure we were in the right spot too. Until we sent him the first draft of the map, but then he was our friend. Right away, he got back to us. But it's just like he didn't know me as an investigator. He knew me as he's quote unquote a fireside talker, a storyteller, which indeed I am. But at the same side, I am an investigator, and I have led expeditions and dealt with expeditions for a very long time. So that's another aspect of my skill set, if you want, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
I should say a lot of people thought this, just because Robert's really handsome and he's good looking, and that there's really no depth to him, but what they don't understand is that he's got a lot of intelligence. He's not just, he's the Brad Pitt of Bigfooting or whatever, but there's a lot more to Robert than
Kipp,
that.
there can only be one of those, and that's you. So
I think we all know who the Brad Pitt of Bigfooting is, and his name rhymes with Art. Latino.
Yeah, well, you're hitting on the things that's good about this group of the Bluff Creek Project. We've all got a specialty, and we all work well together. Again, Robert's, he's a police officer. He's an investigator. He knows how to investigate things. Plus, he's working in the woods. He's always been working in the woods, working in the parks. So he's a great resource. He's incredible energy. I call him the battery. He's the thing that keeps us going. It keeps us investigating and measuring and asking new questions, which is great. And then, Steven's obviously the history. I don't know how that guy keeps all that information in his brain. It must hurt. So,
Yeah.
And if the Bluff Creek Project were like the A team, then Jamie would be that one guy that can take.
yeah, he builds stuff
MacGyver
for us. Oh yeah, we can do that. We want an elevated, some kind of crazy contraption. He'd be, oh yeah, I can do that.
He can weld, he can glue, he can design. Yeah, he's like our
and he came
forces,
in, with our map, because our map was accurate enough. And when I came in, I basically just kept our survey online. I was at what we call it, the smart end of the tape measure, and also had the compass. And so we were, the hard part, that was a big ordeal in itself, was just to get that whole location grid plotted, surveyed, and drawing our north to south line, because it was just so thick at first. So we had to do sections at a time. And honestly, Robert, it's something we could probably go back and redo now and see how accurate we were, because we've got it fairly open now, so we can get longer measurements. And, we should go back and do that again. But we've utilized clearing the area to get more measurements to known stumps. We're going to continue to do that, and and play around with getting more footage and getting the film. We have the Stevens camera now, but I do want to. I think future stuff for us is looking for a 20 millimeter lens, so we can put on one of these cameras, because I've got 2 more rolls of film that we can burn. One that's going to do better in the low light, faster film. So we'll get more definition on you walking the path. And, there's going to be more fun stuff that we'll be doing, as well as our camera project, which is continually going 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. The lithium batteries are working really well for us. They're lasting through the winter, and sometimes we don't even have to change them, and they'll last through the summer, and then we just change them before we shut everything down and leave everything before they close the gates. So that'll continue, and we'll keep you updated on Facebook. And again, this project is completely open sourced. If we do get that money shot one day, so to say, I can't say we're not going to make money off of it, but it's going to go public. They'll just go right out into and let everybody do an analysis of it and see what they think. Because I tell you what, we definitely know the animals that are down there, and we've been surprised on our game camera project on some things that we've seen down there, including finding something that we didn't know existed or people thought was extinct. So one day we might get it, and if so, the world will know. We're not making any money off this project. In fact, I know we lose money every year, each one of us, just spending money on food and gas and buying some extra batteries, and when we don't have enough, or a card. But we enjoy it all the same. It's great to hang out with guys like Kipp, Tate, Robert, Steven, Dustin. Dustin is our newest project member. He's doing a lot of good history. He comes down each year on our camp out, and that's another thing we should promote. Well, we don't know, as we're recording this, if our I think it's going to be our 6th annual. It might even be our 7th annual camp out is going to go on this year, but hopefully it does. And that's July 10th through the 12th, 2020. But we'll see how things go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it should be fine by then.
It could be, but what's going to go on if they don't open up the gates? That could be a possibility. If they keep things closed, that's one of the easy things for them to do, is just keep those gates locked. So we'll play it by ear and see how it turns out, and talk to people like Kipp, who have the inside track on all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We'll
That's a
see.
good thing to do.
I would think that there's a lot of unknowns right
Yep,
now, just
exactly.
with the current situation with COVID-19. So it remains to be seen. I think that optimistically speaking, we can always hope that we'll have turned the corner on this whole thing. And even if the gates are closed, we have those options of supporting that really awesome Bluff Creek Resort.
Yeah.
That that plan a camp out there or something, or just a gathering of getting some minds together and
we can always maintain our 6
too,
feet
so.
separation out there. Plenty of room. So we're
we got
That
we got Twin
absolutely.
Lakes out there. I know that place should be open.
Again, that's another thing that there's a gate on that. They could shut that and just say don't go down there. So there's gates all over that could be shut. So we'll just play it by ear, and we'll do a reconnaissance as soon as they typically open the gates, which will be somewhere around the first week of June. And we'll see how the snow is and all that kind of stuff too. There's 3 different ways in. Well, 2 ways that go into one way, and then one other way in. And they all take some elevation. So if we get a ton of snow like this storm we just had, I don't think it's going to be that much. If it starts melting, we'll get in there. But we'll keep everybody updated. And until then, yeah, we'll just.
Well, I think that it's been I was just going to say it's been a great first inaugural podcast with 2 of the original members from the Bluff Creek Project. And so appreciate both Rowdy and Robert taking some time from their valuable time on their Sunday evening. And Tate, it's got to be probably about 1 o'clock in the morning over there in Des Moines.
Actually, but
I know here in Sacramento, we're coming up on close to 8 o'clock, and it's been a great conversation. That's one of the fun things I think about just this group is that it's such a comfortable, casual, just a great group of folks being able to kind of share the experiences. So with that, Robert and Rowdy, thanks again. Thanks for coming on the show. And Tate,
thanks, guys.
I'll let you end it with this.
Thank you guys, and be sure to catch us next week on the Bluff Creek Project Podcast.